Welcome to the EMN podcast, where philosophy meets disaster and uncomfortable truths meet the profession we call emergency management. This is not safe space thinking. This is the arena. Let's begin.
Good morning, everyone. This is the EM podcast. As you see, I am not joined by Todd DeVoe today. Todd is sick, so I am actually joined by Andrew Boyarsky. So my name is Dan Scott, if you don't already know that. Andrew, good morning, and how are you today, my friend?
Good morning, Dan. Glad to join you. I'm doing fine, just trying to keep warm in this very still cold environment that we're in the Northeast.
Yeah, I mean, the new system came in, didn't it?
Yeah, we have another sort of Arctic blast, and I think we're supposed to get maybe a little dusting, but yeah, it's supposed to warm up actually starting tomorrow. So we're supposed to get back to close to 30, 32 degrees, 34 degrees freezing temperatures, not but close to sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah, it's weird, and that's one of the topics. Well, Breach today is about these storms that came in and how they affect people here. Actually, in Gilroy, California, I was just telling people that it's unusually warm. It's cold throughout overnight, but in the day, it's getting into the 70s and even almost 80 degrees last week. And I went to Fresno this weekend, and it was unusually warm there as well. So here on the West Coast, we're in. Our temperatures are low at night, but warmer during the day, which is weird for this time of year anyway. So that could pose problems in itself, when you're dealing with, freezing temperatures at night and then warmer temperatures during the day. How do you plan for that? Especially the homeless, population and stuff like that. So today, our topic, I did an article. And I forget when I did it too. I wrote it, don't remember when I published it, but it went out, and it was basically about the cycle of resilience and how tough times shape strong leaders. And so we're going to talk about that today. I sent you that article that I'm going to reference for us to kind of look at and talk about. But I felt it was relevant considering where we are right now with. We're in tough times, that's for sure, especially as it relates to emergency management and how we look at it, but how we respond to it is really going to identify what type of emergency manager, what type of leader we are and are going to be. And I thought it was a relevant topic. What do you think? I mean, you think it's something that you care to broach with me today?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to discover here or to delve into, so happy to do so.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time and filling in for Todd. Todd's probably watching right now. If he's not, shame on him. And if he is, he needs to give us some comments and share the posting that we're live right now. But so I'm going to talk. Let's go ahead and get started on that topic itself. And last week I shared a clip from last week's show, and that clip, it was about being invisible as an emergency manager. And Todd likes to get me wound up. He likes to get me fired up and then just kind of let me go. And him and Dr. Randy Collins are the same way, actually. We'll be on meetings and stuff, and they know how to get me fired up. So he got me fired up, and then we had that clip to show for it. And there was actually they want to try and do that more. They want to try and get me fired up more in these meetings and see if they could get more content out of it and get me fired up just because they think it's funny. This to get me fired up. But today, one of the things that really brings us all around is this saying here. So I'm going to go ahead. Tough times make strong people. Strong people make good times. Good times make weak people, and weak people make tough times. This is a repeated cyclical system that we live in. We are for sure right now in a tough time, and it will depict what type of strength comes from that as we, as individuals that are in the field of emergency management and other areas as well, finance, there's politics. I mean, there's all these other emphasis on these times that we face, and how when we face tough times, we become stronger because we're faced to go through these tough times, and either we're going to get through it or we're going to quit. And that really depicts what type of leader we're going to be, what type of EM we're going to be, what kind of person we're going to be in these times. After these times, we're going to be stronger than we were. You know, when they say, what's that song? If you're in hell, keep on going, you know, because you're going to get through it eventually. And when you get through it, you'll be stronger. So what do you think about that? What do you think about that concept?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to look at the situation and sometimes complain, whine, whatever. And, you know, at the same time, you know, if we look at the, you know, sort of I think the Marines are sort of the stereotypical sort of, you know, deal with the situation and address it, right? So adapt and overcome when the situation is tough. And, you know, that doesn't mean that as an emergency manager that you should just bear all the burden and the stress. I think there is a time to talk to people about stressful situations. And in fact, I have a podcast coming out soon. It will probably be next week that I conducted with Patrick Beckley, who is the director of emergency management for Long Island Railroad. And he was also the head of emergency management for Nassau County out in Long Island for a long time. And he actually gave a great presentation a few years back for Region 2 on disaster mental health for emergency managers, public health, public safety professionals. And, you know, one of the, we oftentimes sort of sometimes push aside our own mental health issues, or, you know, when it's stressful for other folks to sort of not recognize when they need to sort of, let's say, take time out and sort of re-energize. And so in that conversation that we had, we talked a lot about some of the mental health issues and issues that we deal with, and what goes into a good disaster mental health, or it's not just psychological first aid, but what really helps to build that kind of mental health resilience, both for an organization and for people individually. He talks about basically having your sort of mental health sort of first aid kit, you know, something that you could use to sort of, you know, when times are tough, sort of to get back to some sort of sense of stasis, if you will. It's easy to sort of get thrown off your game sometimes when so much is coming at you. But I think that to me is a really important factor, that it's not just, okay, grin and bear it the whole time. I think that's not always realistic sometimes, but you know, we do need to sort of look at what can we effectuate, what can we do. And then also, I think, as you sort of lay out to a degree in the article, because I did read that, is you know, making sure that you get out ahead of things. Because I think to what your original quote was, you know, if we sort of ignore and we don't engage early on with those communities and with those partners, then we're going to be alone and we're going to be scrambling at the time. And I think, to me, that is one of the challenges. I think, as you put it, you know, sort of getting upstream of the potential decisions and decision making for leaders before you have a situation.
Yeah, you know, and I like the mental health aspect of what you're saying there as well, because that absolutely is important. Getting ahead of it, I think that's where I get so frustrated, is I feel like we as professionals, and I use that term loosely with some people, is that we're reacting versus responding. You know, and when we react to all the stuff that just comes our way, we're not doing our best work. We're reacting to what's in front of us because it's just presented itself, versus responding, meaning we planned for it. We were ahead of it. We thought it out. We worked with people. And I feel like we, as a profession, we react to a lot of things that we should be responding well to. And I feel like, as individuals in the profession, to be a great emergency manager, we have to be proactive, and we have to be constantly preparing for these things that are going to be coming our way. Being realistic in that knowing that you don't prepare for things that aren't going to come your way, but you got to prepare for things that you know will come at some point. And I feel like there's a lot of like, especially in the media, you feel surprise. Like there's a surprise that this happened. And it's,
Yep.
and you hear unprecedented a lot. And it's like, it's not. It's, you should not be surprised that this has happened. You should not be surprised that you're being faced with this. It's happened before. It may have happened a few years ago and you don't experience it every year, but you've experienced it. So it's not unprecedented that it happened. It
Right.
shouldn't be surprising that you're experiencing it. And it shouldn't be surprising that you're getting the results that you're getting based off of the work you're not doing. I actually just put out an article on that. Is why are you getting upset when you didn't put in the work? You're getting upset about results, the outcome that you didn't put any work in to get. If you wanted a certain outcome, put in the work to get that outcome. And, you know, when it comes to these times that we're experiencing, if we just sit passively by, you don't improve at all. You just, you become another problem.
Yeah.
If we're experiencing these tough times, which we're experiencing, you know, these increased, the increased number of events that are happening, the intensity of these events that are happening, the length of time that the response is taking, and the stuff within politics and the reforming of FEMA, and then you have financial issues with grants and potential funding problems in the future. Then we have things like bigger situations, like we have you know, FIFA, and then we have this coming, and they're planning for all that, and then you have you know, just, I mean, it's a compounding effect. And if we're seeing all these things come at us right now, and if we're not doing the work now to make ourselves better, to be better in the moment for the next time, it's just a repetitive of failure. If we make ourselves better for the next time, we respond better the next time.
Yeah.
And in responding better the next time, we have a better result, better outcomes. And if we become, indeed, we're experiencing these tough times right now, but if we embrace these tough times for what they really are, they're a chance for us to improve. They're a chance for things to get better. They're a chance for us to advocate. They're a chance for us to strengthen our resolve.
Yep.
When we come out of this, we're going to be so much stronger. So the next time the tough times hit, we're going to be that much stronger. And that's what I feel. It comes not just in our mental health, but our physical health even. Our programs that we work in, the partners that we build, the partnerships that we want to maintain. If we're doing all that, making those stronger, implementing and improving like we're supposed to be doing, when it comes to when we are experiencing these tough times, they're not so tough anymore. You know, so that's kind of my line of thinking there, is like, and historically, this is a historically proven fact of these things. And I'm doing more research on it as well. There's a book called Generations that works on phases and seasons and the repetitiveness of these types of situations that come. And if we're not doing the right thing in the moments that we're supposed to be doing them, then the next time it happens, it's just either the same or worse. There's no improvement. And I feel like especially with serving our jurisdictions, I mean, if we aren't using these times right now to prove why emergency management is needed and is important and why it's invaluable, we're failing. We should be proving our worth in these moments. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think this speaks to the conversation and the article that I had, or the conversation that I had with Todd a few weeks ago, and the article that he wrote, and that is, you know, the silent failure, right? And that, you know, when nothing happens for a long period of time, we tend to neglect or ignore the need for emergency management capabilities and resourcing, et cetera. It's easy to cut budgets when nothing happens, you know, for years. And, you know, we're contending with that problem on a regular basis in different parts of the country, right? There's an exigency, so to speak, to act when, you know, you have wildfires out in Los Angeles. In the aftermath of that, okay, well, now we need to increase building codes, et cetera, to improve fire resiliency for that, you know, for the WUI, as we like to say, right, wildland urban interface, you know, to protect from wildfire. And at the same time, you go out a few years from now, and there may be willingness to relax those standards because, oh, we haven't had so many, you know, issues. We don't need that as much or the risk has changed in some meaningful way when it maybe in reality it hasn't. And if we look at a good case in point, for example, preparations and measures for just emergency evacuation for major urban centers, but New York City, Washington, D.C., other areas, when you could have a major power outage, especially during the wintertime, during extreme events, either extreme cold or extreme heat, where it can impact people. And I saw this during after the aftermath actually of Hurricane Sandy here in my own hometown. So I was doing double duty. I was helping with the city efforts because a lot of my planning and efforts were there, in the years prior to Hurricane Sandy. Just after Hurricane Sandy hit, we had a dip in temperatures. We actually had about 6 inches of snowfall, and people were, miserable. They lost power in some cases. They were out of their houses, and so they needed emergency shelter. Well, there was emergency shelter available in the city, but out here, in the suburbs, so to speak, a lot of communities hadn't really planned for that. We did actually. I trained a number of CERT volunteers, so they were ready to spring into action, and we were able to build things out for the emergency shelter for out of our rec center. But that's a unique situation because that doesn't necessarily exist in every community. And I think to your point is we need to get out in front of these sorts of things and that thinking the unthinkable, because these things can and will happen regardless of whether it's in the Northeast or in the Southwest or Southeast, or there's going to be communities that are just not going to be able to withstand these things, and then not going to be able to expect that somebody's riding over the hills as the cavalry to come and help them. Not only with the response,
that's the big thing, yeah,
but the recovery part. And where are you going to get those funds for recovery? And the hard decisions are going to have to be made. That question came up recently in a lecture. How do you handle long-term recovery? And one of the ways in which you can handle long-term recovery is to have a genuine conversation ahead of time with members of the community and that's a hard discussion to have because people are trying to imagine, well, what happens if we lose a significant amount of housing stock, or we lose a lot of local businesses, or infrastructure is impacted? And then who owns those risks? And how do we address them? So, and those are things that they tie into the insurance system. Who has insurance, who's insured, who's not insured, who's underinsured, those sorts of things. And then the public assistance part. I mean, how's government going to be able to pay for some of those aspects? Local government. I mean, local governments, there's a whole discussion there, but I think, getting out in front of it and thinking, where are we going to be able to do? What do we do if we have to retreat from certain objectives of what we're looking to achieve, or certain asset bases?
Well, I think that boils back down to the responsibility that we have as individuals in doing the job. And if we're not going to do it ourselves, like we can find others who have, is identifying the research and the what's the word I'm looking for? Justification for why we need to be doing certain things, and why the things that we are doing in these times where we're not experiencing crisis or disaster emergency, the blue skies, right? Where people say, well, it's hard to justify what we do and how we do it. Well, it's because no one knows or hears or anything. We're not saying what we're doing. We're not telling them how it's benefiting, what the benefits are of the work we're doing, or showing them the research that proves why, if we do these things, the outcomes will be better, like the mitigation parts of things. As we see like just with recently, and that's one of the reasons why I was so heated last week, was with the Nashville situation, how they were without power for so long. And the decisions that were made to not do certain things to save money, and then the response now the consequence of that is all of these, even more money, even more suffering on the people who are reliant on the government. And then you boil that back down to the fires that we had in LA, and they say, well, they cut all this money to do all this mitigative efforts on the trees and the thinnings and all that. So it did all these things. Well, now we have the new building codes and all these things that are coming from this. If we're doing the research to show that these things have happened, and by doing these things, the response and the recovery was less and cost less money and less time and less manpower, and there was less power outages and there was less destruction and there was less death, then we can implement that in these blue skies to say we're doing these things because the research shows, based off of real life experiences, that doing these things works. And I don't feel like we're doing that enough in emergency management. As the emergency manager doing the job, are we showing the community, our leadership, why we do what we do and why it's important that we continue working on these things, and why we allocate funding up front versus allocate money on the back end, especially with the aspect of we may be losing that certain amounts of funding that come from the federal government. With that in foresight, who knows what's going to happen? We don't know yet, but we do know at some level there's going to be funding cuts.
Yep.
But we're always dependent on, well, FEMA's going to come. And when FEMA's coming, the government is going to help us. Well, that's not always the case, number one. Number two is it may not always be there in the capacity that it is now. But three, the changes that may come as well, it may be there, and it may be there in the same capacity. But there may be changes that happen that prevent you from getting that help, like percentages and quotas and the cost of these things. You got to meet this threshold, and if that goes up for any reason, or that cost match differentiates in any reason, that could prevent you from even participating in that.
Yep.
These changes are going to come at some level, and if we're not ready for that, that really makes us weaker then. And Todd has got a comment here. How do we assign risk? What is owned by government? Clarify that for me, Todd, on what is owned by government. Like what responsibilities they own, what financial responsibilities, or training, response. That's such a broad statement. So I'd like give me some more context on that if you don't mind. But yeah, we do need to know that. We do need to clarify it and assign those risks. We need to identify those risks, and then we need to assign them priorities. We need to be doing THIRAs, and I just wrote a report, honestly, from RAND on THIRAs and HIRAs and all that other stuff that are required, and how they either help or don't help a community based on length of time that it takes for people to do them, the cost of implementation, all these things that are required by the government. And the report's it's bleak. It's a bleak report on having us do these things that don't really have an effect on the outcome of disaster or risk or emergency hitting. Mm-hmm. But we're forced to do it to be compliant. Well, what are we can be compliant for if we're not going to be able to actually hit thresholds or get the help that we need because I don't want to get too that we should actually, that's a report we should actually dive deep into, and I'll share it with you. But it's like, why are we doing these things if the work we're putting in doesn't have the result that we need it to have, right? And just like what I'm saying with the work that we're putting in now, we need to be putting in that work so that it has the result that it needs to have. If we're not putting in that work, why aren't we putting in that work? And at what level does it become negligence or incompetence or complacency? At what levels? There's levels of this. There's complacency, right? You're doing the thing, but then it doesn't happen for a while, so you kind of lay off of it. But you're a good emergency manager. But then it happens, and then you hadn't thought about it for a while. Then there's just negligence where you just don't do it at all, And then there's more than that. There's the incompetence where they shouldn't even be in the position. They were given the position because it was a needed position, and it's a tertiary duty. They never concentrate on it. They don't know anything about it, but yet they have the responsibility of emergency management. There's so many levels that we got to look at.
I want to address that, and I acknowledge that there are some people who are assigned as the emergency manager. They're multi-hatted. Sometimes it's a decision made by elected leaders where They have limited knowledge about what that role entails or how important that role might be until something serious happens, until some gaps start to really show themselves. And I think that that's changing. I don't know whether it's changing fast enough or not. But one aspect I think that is certainly there is a sense of agency that exists, and I think for certain emergency managers, they look at what they can actually do, what they can actually impact, and what the capabilities are. And again, when you're only looking at what exists, on your desk or within the four walls in which you're working on, then you're going to limit what you can actually do. And that's why I think that we need to really engage the community a little bit more. And I think it gets to the point about what maybe Todd's question here, and that is, well, how do we assign risk? And what is the expectation? What's the expectation on the community level, the household level, for them to be able to respond? I live in a community where you've got middle-class folks who have some means, and when they lose power, it's like, so when is power going to get back on? Well, I'm sure PSE&G, that's the utility that services our area, will get back to us and let us know. However, the expectation shouldn't be that the power will go out sometimes, and you need to have a plan for how you're going to respond to that. And staying in a cold home is not necessarily feasible. So, having that alternative to being able to go to a neighbor or go to another family member in the area temporarily until power was restored, yes, it's inconvenient and it's disruptive and things like that. But there are certain people in the community who may not be able to afford to do that and may not have the means. That's where we need to have some social services that are able to jump in, and it can be members of the community. It doesn't always have the solution's not always government to the rescue. We can play that coordination role that we are intended to do in certain communities where the resources might not be there. So as an example, there's community faith-based organizations open their doors, have the resources to be able to house people, especially those who are unhoused in certain places. I know that work has gone on in the city during this very cold spell to bring people in from the cold. The message has gone out. There's more active efforts. And yes, there is a coordination role by those social service departments, but they have limitations of what they can do. They're not going to be the total solution. So those partners that they work with are really going to be part of that. And then I think as far as the spending is concerned, there's a lot has been written about this. And certainly insurance plays a big role in this. And that is not a primary line of defense. That the first line of defense should be mitigation and prevention. But when something happens, insurance needs to kick in when there's damage and loss that's encountered. From the household level, the government, and I think governments are going to have to start thinking about, when they have to replace, roads, remove trees, clean up, snow beyond what's expected, what's normal, that is going to have to factor into their fiscal decision making. And there's going to have to be a conversation between local governments, county governments, and state governments, or from parish to like whatever level we're talking about, to realistically see how we meet those needs.
Yeah, and I see, Todd's point. I think basically because most electric companies out there, if we got a power outage, they're private, and then you have the government, but they're the ones who take the blame because the power's out, right? So yeah, it's a government responsibility. Yeah, that's one of those things it can be rough. There's a lot of things out there too that we got to think about in those type of same situations. As you mentioned, our partners that do these things like our faith-based and our Red Crosses and these other places, they step up in these times of emergency as well. But one of the areas that I don't think a lot of people realize is that they're funded by grants, and they're funded, a lot of stuff that they're getting. So there's some of the stuff that the resources that they're offering are provided by finances that are coming from certain sources like the government, right? And if those go away, what does that mean for our level of reliability in those areas as well? There's just so much that we could go to unpack. We're coming up on our time. right now, and I hate to have to cut us short just because it's such a. We could talk about it all day. We literally could talk about this stuff all day and how we can better it. But if you're out there and you're listening, you're watching, just think about how you can implement more preventative, mitigative, and preparedness efforts in your community, especially if you're the emergency manager in what you're doing versus always worrying about response and recovery, because doing all those things up front does help us in the back end, and it costs a lot less money in those efforts. I'm sorry Todd couldn't be with us, but he was with us in spirit. As you saw, he's throwing some comments out there, trying to stump us a little bit and make us uncomfortable with some of his questions. That's Todd. That's what Todd does. So anyway, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time, for filling in for Todd, for making yourself available at such short notice. Your insight on that has been very insightful. But also knowing that you're living it right now. You're there in the cold. You experienced the storms. You're still dealing with some aftermath of that, and the systems that are coming in and making it even colder. So thank you for sharing that input and the resources that you had, and just sharing this with your time today.
It's my pleasure. It was very nice to join you, Dan, and to discuss this issue, because it's an important one, and it's one that we will continue to turn to and address. So thank you.
It will. So if you're out there listening and watching, please comment, share, comment in the comments. Let us know what you want to hear more of. Let us know what you agree with, disagree with, how we can be better at the content that we're bringing to you. This is EMN Media. I am Dan Scott, Andrew Boyarsky. If you're out there, stay warm. And as Todd likes to say, stay hydrated. We'll talk to you next time.
When the sirens scream out loud, or the voice that breaks the cloud, heads held high when things go wrong, will guide you through its strength and song. Disaster strikes without a sound, chaos reigns but we're around. Public safety in our hands, standing strong in every land. Emergency